Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Bryan Hughes. Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Please have a seat. Thank you. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for coming over.
Thanks for having me.
So why do you want to be Speaker?
Things could be run a lot differently in the House. A lot of members feel that way. It's been reported in your publication. Members on both sides have concerns about the way things are going. And that's part of why I put out my letter to members even last week, talking about how we could open up the process, decentralize power. Those are the issues I've been talking about with members and listening to members about during the campaign.
So it's an administrative rationale rather than a substantive rationale. In other words, it's process that's motivated you to vote, to run for Speaker, and not any substantive issues that you think would be different under a Speaker Hughes.
Well, the process drives the substantive issues, wouldn't you say? If there are bills that have strong support among the membership, be they from the left or the right, those bills should make it through the process and have their day, and see the light of day. And so the two are pretty lined up. I think if the process is done right and the members have the power they need to have, we're going to see the substantive issues brought forth. And so there's frustration, I think, among members and among folks back home about some of the substantive issues that aren't making it through the process. So I'm talking about process, but obviously that affects the substance as well.
Name a substantive issue that you believe there's frustration back home about, and let me maybe ask the question a second way before you answer it. Tell me something that in the 82nd session would have gone differently, an issue that would have gone differently under Speaker Hughes rather than Speaker Strauss.
We talk about bills that have broad support back home. If they're supported by a majority of members, we assume that means they're supported by a majority of the folks in Texas, right? Members are coming off the election. They have districts where they're close to their people. They're listening to them. Talk about fiscal things. Every session that I can remember, we've had bills filed, at least in recent memory, to limit the growth of government to population growth plus inflation, to look at things like revenue caps, property tax reform, looking at the appraisal process, looking at appraisal caps. Those things always get filed. They have a number of co-authors, but we don't see those bills getting hearings, at least early enough to be meaningful in the process.
And so those are all specific pieces of legislation that under Speaker Hughes you would encourage coming forward and would facilitate getting a fair hearing and a vote.
Well, let me tell you how. Yes. And you may have seen the letter that I sent. You guys published it.
Yes.
We talked about some specific areas of the rules that could be changed. And if the rules were opened up, and we all talk about openness and transparency, I think we're all for that, but we can make that in a tangible way. If we make some changes to the rules to allow members to have more say in the process. And again, if a bill has broad support, the committee process is important, but it shouldn't be used to allow those bills to die back in the shadows. So look at the bills that are filed, look at what members are for. Those are the bills that you would see coming forward if we had the system I'm proposing.
What has Speaker Strauss not done with regard to the process that you think he should have done? What does he as Speaker have the power to do or the latitude to do that you wish he had done with regard to some of this stuff?
Well, we talked about the rules, and you may recall the specific points I talked about. One has to do with, I didn't use the term, but some kind of a discharge petition, right? Again, if a bill has support among the members, the committee process shouldn't be used to kill that bill. Now, committee process should clean up the bills, and it should make us think of stuff we hadn't thought about before. Sometimes bills don't need to make it through the process. We get that. That's what the process is for. But if we have something in the rules that makes it easier for bills that have broad support to make it through, we're going to see that happen. Also, if we give members more control over their committee assignments, it's important that the Speaker control, that is, appoint a majority of the committees. I don't think anybody argues with that. You may have seen there were questions about that. I think it's important that the Speaker appoint the majority of members on a committee, but it doesn't have to be a big majority. We could have the members have a little more control in that process over their own destiny. If we do that, I think it's going to affect the bills that come forward, whether I like those bills or not. I'm talking about what the members want.
There are some people who believe giving members more control over things like committee assignments is a bit like the inmates running the asylum. You don't think that leadership would be better placed in the hands of someone to mediate that? I mean, you have 150 people. All of them see themselves as statesmen. They all are going to want plum committees. I mean, how do you actually give power over to the members without it becoming chaos or anarchy?
Well, let me be precise if you want to talk about the details.
Sure.
Under the current system, if you look at our standing committees, substantive and procedural, there's 360 some odd committee slots. And under the current system, about 28% of those, almost a third, are chosen by the members. So about right at 100 under the current system. Basically for example, on a 6-member committee, on a 9-member committee, pardon me, the Speaker appoints 6 members, and then 3 are chosen based on seniority. So we could increase those seniority
Just
spots.
change the balance.
Well, I'm not suggesting we change it, but let's make it a little different. Yeah. Let's give the Speaker a 5-4 majority rather than a 6-3 majority. So there's not a concern about people gaming the system and the minority party taking over a committee. The Speaker still appoints the majority, but give members more control over that. And let's look at our substantive committees, which now are appointed completely by the Speaker with no member control at all. And let's look at opening some of those up to seniority appointments as well. If we do that, we can increase the number of member picks on those committees from around 100 to 150 plus. The Speaker still is appointing over 50%, about 55%, if my numbers are correct, of the committees. He's still got leadership, still can set the agenda, but it takes a little bit of that power away. And Evan, you know how it goes, whether we're talking about government or any organization. I mean, power tends to concentrate, and that's not Speaker Strauss's fault or anybody else. It tends to happen over time.
Right.
And now
in fact, the scenario, Representative, that you're talking about preceded or predates Speaker Strauss's speakership.
Oh, of course.
Right, so if Speaker Craddock were in office now, you'd be challenging Speaker Craddock.
I hope it's clear. I hope it's clear to everyone that I'm talking about the way the rules are set up. There's too much power in the Speaker's office.
So it's not about this Speaker, it's about any Speaker under this system.
I think the system will be a lot better no matter who the Speaker is. We shouldn't give too much power to anyone. I mean, you know our system. You know this. I mean, that's why we have 3 branches of government. That's why we have 2 houses. Our founders and as Americans, we've consistently believed in diffusing power and spreading it out and dividing it up, not putting too much in one place. You know what I'm talking about.
What about the question of chairmanships? You know, a lot of controversy comes up every couple of years about, well, who are you going to appoint as chairs? There are many key committees that if you appoint this person, the outcome is likely to be this. If you appoint that person, the likely outcome is that. Over on the Senate side, we just saw with Senator Zaffarini not being reappointed as chair of Senate Higher Education in favor of a Republican chair, much discussion of what the proper balance is between Republicans and Democrats. There were some people who wanted Governor Dewhurst to just appoint only Republican chairs. Speaker Strauss has committed to me publicly and in front of an audience that he intends to appoint Democratic chairs this time. Would Speaker Hughes appoint only Republican chairs, or would you give some chairs to Democrats?
We have a tradition in the House, at least in modern history, of appointing committee chairmanships based on the partisan makeup of the House.
Right.
That's a good practice. I would continue that.
You believe Speaker Strauss has done well in that effect?
Well, I think as far as dividing up along the makeup of the House, that's important. And Speaker Craddock did that, Speaker Strauss did. I understand speakers before Speaker Craddock did that. I wasn't here before him, but I think that's been a practice, at least in modern history. Yeah. As far as committee chairmanships and committee appointments go, we have a very talented group of folks in the legislature. And we look at people's abilities, look at their experience, and put people where they're in their highest and best use. I don't believe the committee process or chairmanships should be a way to punish enemies or reward friends. We should put the most qualified folks in place.
Speaker Strauss do that last session?
It's hard to look at people's motives, but if you talk to members about that, there's a perception that happened. There may be a perception that that's common practice. And Evan, may I say, it shouldn't be. Yeah. Many of these things we accept, oh, that's politics, that's business as usual. It doesn't have to be that way. We all talk about transparency and openness. Let's let the sun shine. Let's open these things up.
Mr. Hughes,
paying attention.
You say that other people say that Speaker Strauss may have used committee chairmanship appointments for. I'm not concerned with what they think. I want to know what you think. Do you personally believe that Speaker Strauss punished people with the committee chairmanship appointment process or the committee assignment process? Can you cite specific instances where you believe that was the case?
I would just suggest that we look at folks who support Speaker Strauss and folks who oppose Speaker Strauss and look at the committees they ended up on. And again, this is nothing new. I'm not saying he invented this. This is nothing new. This has been a practice for a while. I think it should be less so. I think we should be more concerned about.
So he should appoint his enemies to be the chair of.
No, I think it should be less of a factor. I think we should look at people's abilities and their experience and put them in the best place.
The old cliche, Representative, is there are two cliches. One is that elections have
consequences.
We know that elections have consequences. Now let's start with that one. You know, the last election we went from 102-48 in the House to 95-55, Republican majority of 95. Still a Republican majority that is larger than any majority that Speaker Craddock ever had as Speaker, and a majority in which really the Republicans can do whatever they want without a single Democratic vote. Democrats can't block anything, can't pass anything without Republicans. The numbers are still very heavily on Speaker Strauss's side. Do you think that the Speaker deserves any credit for the election outcome? I mean, he certainly would receive the blame, would he not, if the numbers had gone down and the House had been more evenly divided?
I don't know if the Speaker was involved in House races in the fall. I didn't really pay that close attention. I was trying to help candidates, and I guess he was as well. Yeah. I wouldn't give him credit or blame for the outcome in the fall.
Right.
The Republicans in Texas are doing well. There's a lot of soul searching among Republicans, or at least among the people talking about the Republicans at the national level. But in Texas, voters seem to be responding to a conservative message, and that's why Republicans
In fact,
still have a big
Texas is an
majority.
outlier compared to the rest of the country. It was maybe a good Democratic year elsewhere in the country. In Texas, it was a pretty good Republican year.
I think it was. And of
Right.
course, even nationwide, folks that voted for President Obama still elected a Republican majority of the U.S. House.
Right.
And those Republican members are by and large in favor of the Ryan plan, pretty conservative position. So
Right.
a lot of folks split their tickets. But yes, it was a good year for President Obama.
But again, with 95 Republicans in the House, in the majority, the likelihood is, would you say, that the House is going to be conservative again?
I would. In fact, I've read, I don't recall if this was in the Tribune, I've read some people observe that the House Republicans may be more conservative than last session, even though there's a few less.
One of the issues you hear, Representative, with Speaker Strauss is occasionally people say, well, he's not sufficiently conservative. Some in the Tea Party will say, he's not one of us. Do you believe Speaker Strauss is sufficiently conservative?
You know, I don't know if before the Speaker race 2 years ago, Speaker Strauss would have described himself as conservative, and I'm not certain, I haven't documented this.
Yeah.
Well, you recall back in '09 when you interviewed him, I think it was January of '09 when he first became Speaker, he tended to shy away from labels like that and just talk more about the issues he was in favor of. So I don't know if he would have described himself as a conservative. If you look at the spectrum on most issues, I think it's pretty objective that I have more conservative positions than he does. But let me say, and Evan,
be specific. Tell me in it, you said that I have more conservative. Be specific. Tell me issues on which you're more conservative than the Speaker.
Well, talking about fiscal matters, again, limiting the growth of the government to population growth plus inflation, that's something that I've signed on to bills for, I've come out in favor of publicly. The governor's budget compact, I don't march lockstep with the governor and everything, but I came out and said, I agree with what he's saying in budget compact. Issues like that. On the pro-life issue, I think it's pretty clear that on pro-life matters, I'm one of the more pro-life members of the House. I mean, I think these are really questions. I think these are a question of record votes.
Speaker self-defines as pro-life.
Now, does he? I know in the interview before he didn't do that, and I know if people have said that about him. And so
I think he said it about himself, I believe.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. Yeah. I think you look at the voting records, and you can tell the difference. But let me make an important point. I am not running for Speaker so that I can ram through my agenda. And Evan, you need to know, when I talk to my Republican friends and folks in the Tea Party and members, I'm making this very clear. I am not saying we need a Republican Speaker to cram through an agenda. I'm saying we have a conservative House. And if the rules are set up right, if they're applied fairly, if we get it started on time, we appoint committees early and move through the process, these bills that have support are going to move. In a conservative House and a Republican House, you would expect conservative bills to move. But I'm not saying that I'm going to be trying to ram those bills through or trying to work to thwart the system. I don't think that's the Speaker's role, whoever the Speaker is. Right. I want to make that very clear. Am I more conservative than Speaker Strauss? Yes. But am I trying to ram through my own agenda? Of course not.
Let's do the math here on the Speaker's race. Always difficult to topple an incumbent Speaker. You know that the Tribune attempted to poll members after the election to get a sense of where this race is. I think at last count we were at 31 solid yes votes for the Speaker. We had one yes vote solidly for you, your own vote.
I did.
I'm glad to know that you're voting for yourself.
Yeah.
We had a number of folks who said that they would either not say or undecided, and then we had a number of people who we just couldn't reach, but we attempted to get it where this race is. What do you take from that? It may just be an inconsequential measure of where the race is right now, but obviously you've got to get to 76, so count yourself out. You've got to get to 75 beyond you.
Right.
I'm assuming Speaker Strauss, as he said, is voting for himself, so you're not going to get his vote.
Right.
What do you do? What is your strategy to get to 75 if you're going to defeat Speaker Strauss?
I'm talking to Republicans and the Democrats, and most of my focus has been, and certainly is now, on those conversations with members, on the phone, in person, at events, and that sort of thing. And we're talking about how the House could be run better.
Yep. And
members are sharing their concerns with me, and that's what I'm putting out there. It's pretty simple. You know, the vote's taken January the 8th, as you know, and it's 76 votes. We haven't seen a list of public supporters for Speaker Strauss, and a number of
Why do you
members,
think?
I don't know. You may recall, you may have heard last week, we heard that phone calls were being made about getting on a list may be coming out. I've heard different things about that. I don't know why. We haven't seen it. Historically, as you know, the incumbent Speaker will put out a list of supporters right after the session, here a year and a half ago, from where we are today. And we haven't seen that happen. And I think the support for Speaker Strauss, is soft. He's a nice guy, and you'll never hear me criticize him personally.
This isn't a personal issue with the two of you.
Oh, no, sir. He's a gentleman, and we get along. But I think his support is soft. I've talked to a number of members, I continue to, and I've even had members tell me, you know, you may see me on a list at some point for Speaker Strauss, but let's keep talking. I'm keeping my options
So you
open.
think that even some of the people who may have indicated their preference for Speaker Strauss may not be solidly for the Speaker?
Yeah, I don't know if members were referring to the list on Texas Tribune or referring to a list the
Just generally
Speaker
speaking,
just
right.
generally speaking, I can tell you the members have told me that. And, you know, members are making calls on my behalf, which I appreciate, and they have told me they're getting the same feedback. So I'm going to keep talking to members, and we're going to keep talking about how the House could be run.
So you got 95 Republicans. You need 76 votes of the total House to win. So let's assume you get a couple dozen Republicans you're able to pick off from the Speaker. You're going to need some Democrats to vote for you. Why should a Democrat vote for someone who self-describes as more conservative than the current Speaker?
Evan, as we've been discussing, this race for me, as I talk to members, is about the way the House is run. It's about empowering members. Well, you may recall, right after I filed, I think it was back in June, you had a conversation with my friends Trey Martinez-Fisher and Dan Branch.
Right.
And Trey talked about how I just want to know what the rules are. I realize that we're in the minority, but I want to get a fair shake. I want to know what the rules are, and I want to have a shot. Other Democratic members have said that publicly, and many have told me that privately.
So you think that there are Democratic members who, purely on the grounds of a process argument, would be willing to support a Speaker who may disagree with them on a number of very substantive issues, be more conservative than the current Speaker, simply because they believe, from a process standpoint, the House would be run better?
Yes, and if they trust me that I'm not planning to use the Speaker's office to ram things through the process that I like and the members don't like.
Right.
And I've had Democratic members tell me, I mean, come on, Bryan, it's going to be a Republican majority. We understand that. There's going to be conservative bills moved. We accept that. But we want to be treated fairly. We don't want debate to be arbitrarily cut off. And we want to have a shot. We don't want the committee process to be killing our stuff.
Right. Beyond Representative Martinez-Fisher, who I know presumes to speak for a number of Democrats, whether or not that's actually the case, tell me a Democrat who has expressed some openness to you in supporting you or opposing the Speaker. Very difficult for people to come out and say that they're going to do that. But can you give us any indication of the kind of conversations you're having with specific Democrats?
I haven't asked any members to come out for me publicly, Republican or Democrat. It's still pretty early. There's really no need for that.
Yeah.
In fact, a number of members have said they're going to have town hall meetings with their constituents to talk about these issues.
And so you think it'll be after that they'll
Well, I know for a
be
number
in a
of
position to make a decision?
I know a number of members have already said that. They've
Right.
said that publicly. That's what they plan to do. As far as Democrats, I was talking a moment ago about the conversations we've had. They don't like the way the House is being run. Now, we can look at what some of the public comments have been made. You know, Trey has said a lot publicly. I read something over the weekend where Representative Ana Hernandez Luna talked about, I'm not in a hurry. We're going to see who's going to run the House, let us represent our districts.
Right.
I think Representative Jessica Farrar was quoted as saying, we're going to take our time, we're not in a hurry. A lot of Democratic
Do you
members are
honestly
saying
think
those
that
things
Representative
publicly.
Hernandez Luna and Representative Farrar might choose you for Speaker over Speaker Strauss?
I'm going to make a good case to every member of the House. And yes, of course I do. You know, Evan, I've been in the House for a couple of terms, and I've gotten to know these folks, and I think we have good relationships.
Yep.
And I think there's a level of trust, and that's what I'm banking on.
Okay, well, let's talk about some specific substantive issues, because obviously, although, as you say, I'm not going to ram my agenda through, clearly what you believe matters, and, you know, the Speaker has a perspective on issues that make a difference in the House, and I think people will be interested to know where you come down on this. Let's begin with the budget and with spending issues. As you said, you signed on to the governor's budget compact. There are a lot of people who believe, as the governor does, and as I believe you do, that we don't have a revenue problem in this state, we have a spending problem in this state. Nonetheless, we have a lot of interested parties, people in education, on health care matters, on water, where big ticket items we need to deal with. We may have cut last session, we may have needs this session. How are you going to balance the desire for austerity with the laundry list that people would come to you with as Speaker and say, look, we've got to find money to put basic programs in place?
That's right. Obviously, there's a role for the government. It's important.
Yeah.
Infrastructure is there, obviously, public education, transportation, public safety. Those have to be funded. They have to be funded well. I think what we have to do is take the revenues we have and put them where they ought to be. And part of what members are talking about is making sure that revenues that were promised to be for a certain purpose go for that purpose. If we start there, for example, diversions from Fund 6 for transportation. If we take care of diversions that are going out of there and put that in transportation, that's going to help. If we deal with those things, if we put the money we have where it's supposed to be, I think we can build some trust with the voters, and then we can talk about finding more. But
Do we have enough money right now?
Well, the numbers are still coming in. As you know, we're encouraged. Sales tax receipts continue to show double-digit improvements. The oil and gas, or I should say oil production, not so much gas right now, is really good. The rainy day fund's getting pumped up.
Yeah.
So we're encouraged. I mean, we're going to have a lot more money to deal with than we had last session, it looks like.
Yeah. Do you think we cut public education too much last session, as some people do?
Well, in public education, we have an equity problem. We know that.
Right.
I'm from a rural area, and some of our urban schools have the same concerns. One thing we have to do in public ed is look at mandates that we're pushing down on our teachers and on our students. Obviously, people are concerned about the testing. But again, we need to make sure the money's going to the right place.
Which means what?
Which means just that. If we're causing our teachers and our schools to spend money chasing paperwork that the feds or that we're sending down to them, that's not a good idea. And many of the mandates sound good at the time, and various members have supported various ones. But we need to take a hard look at that and not just talk about local control, but really do something about it. And testing, right? It's a big expense item. We know that. Right. We have to have accountability. And I know this is going to be a big debate next session.
Right. More than 80% of the school boards around the state have passed resolutions against standardized testing.
Well, in the House last session, Representative Dan Flynn had an amendment to put a moratorium on state testing, passed the House, didn't make it all the way through the process. That's going to be a big debate.
Where are you on that issue?
I voted for Representative Flynn's moratorium.
Right.
Especially last session when we were looking at having money problems. Rolling out the new test with new requirements didn't seem like the best course, and I've said that publicly. Again, this is a debate we need to have in the House, and every member should have their say. And just because it's a difficult vote or difficult discussion, we shouldn't avoid it. We shouldn't try to keep it out.
Senate Public Ed Chairman Dan Patrick, newly appointed by Governor Dewhurst, who was here last week, has made no secret of his intention to push some sort of a school choice plan on the Senate side. Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst has said he's for it. The governor has always been for some version of school choice. The sense is that a so-called voucher bill may have less support in the House than in the Senate. Where do you come down on that? Again, you represent a rural area. It's often said that some rural Republicans might align with Democrats to slow down the progress of any school choice bill. I wonder where you would come down on that, and I want to follow up in a second on another aspect of that.
Well, we're talking about choice. I think everyone agrees that parents ought to have as many options as possible for their kids. I think we're all in favor of that. I hope so. What does that look like? I mean, I guess there's a spectrum. There's public school choice that that could certainly be expanded. It's available to a degree. There's charter schools. Then vouchers are out there. They're being discussed. And as you said, on the Republican side, there are some concerns about vouchers. There are concerns about public money going to private schools. On the private school side, there are concerns about the strings that would come along with government money. So it's going to be a robust debate, and we're going to have. In the past, I have supported, I guess it was in my second session, we had a vote on a pilot program in certain failing schools where it was going to be a pilot program affecting all of those areas, and I voted for that. Again, I think there's going to be a big debate even within the Republican Party about the best way to do that. I saw where my friend Representative David Simpson said yesterday that he had concerns about vouchers, about the government money actually going to private religious schools.
Right.
So I think you're right. I think there may be some surprises there.
On an issue like vouchers, you know, Representative, that there's a strong group of folks on the right who support vouchers. And as a member, you have one job and one perspective, but as the leader of a House, you have a very different set of concerns.
That's right.
Would you be willing to cross your ideological brethren on an issue like vouchers? As Speaker, I mean, you'd be subject in theory to the same attacks as you'd be leveling against Speaker Strauss or anybody else. It's one thing to be a member and to support an issue. It's another thing to have to lead all 150 members. And
That's right.
You may not actually be able to get a piece of legislation through, and then you're subject to the same criticism in theory that you're leveling against the Speaker.
And if that's the case, I'll be able to look back and tell everyone what I promised coming in. Yeah. Here's the rules that I support. Yeah. Every member has a shot. If a bill has broad support, it's going to come to the floor. There's certainly no guarantee it's going to pass. Right. It's up to the members to get support for their bills. But I think that's important, and I continue to come back to that. Evan, I have the benefit in this campaign of being able to say the same thing to Democrats as I'm saying to Republicans. I'm not running on ramming through an agenda. I'm running on opening up the process. You know, we talk about transparency and openness, and we're all for that in the abstract. I'm talking about tangible changes to the system that'll actually yield that.
Now, the Speaker has said, the current Speaker has said, I rule the House at the will of the members. Some people think that he's letting himself off the hook in saying that in fact a leader has to lead. You can't just basically stand back and say, you all decide. Would you intend to exert any more control than this? I mean, it sounds to me that you're actually talking about backing off of a lot of the process things to give more power to the members. You understand that the trade-off of that is that if you back off, you're not necessarily able to herd these cats, to control that process.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Speaker, I think, should control a majority of the committee spots, but not a vast majority of them. And members should be able to get bills to the floor if they have broad support. The Speaker still has the gavel, still has a lot of power, and still has to lead the House, and still has to encourage members and represent the House. And those are all important roles. But again, we don't need to concentrate all this power in one place.
Yeah.
I am fine with seeking an office and telling folks up front, I'm going to give up power. I'm going to make this office a little bit less relevant and make the representatives more relevant in the process.
Let me come back to another issue as we're talking about issues, and that would be tort reform. Jay Root of the Tribune published a story yesterday.
I saw that. Questioning
whether you would enjoy support from Texans for lawsuit reform, given the fact that you have been in the past a trial lawyer.
Right.
Sherry Sylvester of TLR, a group that has been a big supporter of a number of the candidates who've won in the last election cycles, conservative candidates, said that they're not sure that you would be able to see the world as they do, given the fact that you have had a role in some personal injury suits in the past. How problematic would this be for you, either in the Speaker's race or in a leadership role, to have TLR not necessarily on your side, given the role they've played in the last few election cycles?
Well, in the Speaker's race, from what I've read and what I understand, they're not getting involved in the Speaker's race.
Right.
They've expressed their views, and they have. We know what their agenda is.
Right.
And Evan, I'd ask folks to look at my voting record. My first session was 2003, and I voted for what a number of people have called the most comprehensive tort reform in the history of Texas. But a number of tort reform measures since then. Some I've supported, some I haven't. I hope folks will look at my record, and as someone who practices law, represents clients, represents small businesses and individuals and a whole array of clients, I want a fair system. Nobody likes frivolous lawsuits, least of all someone who has to work in that system. And so I think folks will look at my record and see that.
Shouldn't be an obstacle to getting support of conservatives who may view the fact that you're a trial lawyer as an issue.
It hasn't concerned the voters of House District 5, a very conservative district. I've just been through a Republican primary, and it wasn't an issue there. And again, I have a pretty good relationship with members, and I continue to develop those, and I don't think it's going to be an issue. Again, because it's not my intention to ram through an agenda. If members are supportive of a bill or a measure, it should have its day. And you won't see me publicly or privately trying to thwart that process.
Let me ask you about health care, which is a big-ticket item that where the price tag is growing by the session to the alarm of many people of both parties. And the legislature, we have a certain number of uninsured people in the state. I think the census estimated 5.8 million uninsured Texans, 23% of the population. At the moment, the position of the state is we're not going to take advantage of the opportunity to expand Medicaid. We're going to figure out some solution here. As Speaker, you may, again, give the responsibility of litigating this issue to the members, but surely you have a point of view that we'd all like to know about what the state's position on health care matters should be, specifically on the question of expansion of Medicaid. The president's been reelected. As Speaker Boehner himself said the other day, the Affordable Care Act is not likely to be repealed.
That's right.
So how should Texas view this? I was interested to see that Florida Governor Rick Scott, who considers himself to be every bit as conservative as our governor here, said the other day that he was going to actually look at whether Florida should now accept reality and take advantage of some of the opportunities that are presented by the Affordable Care Act. Where should the state be, and where would Speaker Hughes be with regard to this issue?
I think the state of Texas is right to say no to expanded Medicaid and also to setting up health care exchanges.
Say no to setting up health care exchanges.
Yes, to say no under the Affordable Care Act. And there's a couple reasons for that. You know, we talk a lot about federalism and about the interplay between the states and the feds. If Texas and some other big states will take this position, I think we can bring the feds to the table and we can talk about some real reform and maybe do something about Medicaid. You know, Medicaid began as a noble program to help children. Obviously, it's grown over time. It's been expanded. The feds have paid less. We've been asked to pay more. And now it's a system that folks don't really want to be in. Doctors don't want to participate in. The care, from what we understand, is not what it could be. And I think if we'll take a stand and say no to expanded Medicaid under the current system and say no to setting up health care exchanges, I think we can bring the feds to the table. And maybe we can get some real reform. Maybe get some improved Medicaid, make it a better system.
What do you think the feds might be willing to do? And what would motivate the feds to come to the table under that scenario?
Well, on health care exchanges, and you know, there's a lot that's been written about that, and the rules are being developed now for the Affordable Care Act. But under the health care exchanges, as you know, The bill sort of assumes that states will set up these health care exchanges, health insurance exchanges. If they don't, the feds have the authority to, but it's not clear where the funding comes from. It's not even clear whether the employer mandate is tied to the state health insurance exchanges and not the federal. A lot of questions because the bill's a little vague. As you know, it was passed kind of quickly. So that's some leverage that Texas has and other states have, and that's one example. Again, I mean, let's bring it to the table. The federal government was created by the states, and let's don't forget about that.
Well, one of the burdens of leadership is that you have to not just say what you're against, you have to say what you're for. So
right.
let me put it to you with regard to health care. We know what you're against.
Right.
What are you for? What would a Speaker Hughes want to see the Texas House do in the next session affirmatively with regard to health care? If we don't like what the federal government's doing, what would you want to see the House do here?
We could do some real reforms in Medicaid. For one thing, we can make sure that we're dealing with fraud. We have a system now where we pay and then we chase the funds to see if there was fraud. Let's have a better system where we make sure we're making the right payments to the providers in the first place. We can probably save some money there. We can certainly save some money there. And let's look at personal responsibility. You talk to physicians who are involved in the Medicaid program, you talk to interest groups and think tanks, and they'll tell you that now in Medicaid in Texas, there's virtually no copay. There are a few exceptions to that, but most of us on Medicaid are not paying any kind of a copay. There's really no personal responsibility there.
Right.
That's not good for anybody. With a waiver from the feds, we could change that, but we don't have that now. We'd like to see that done. We could go a long way toward improving Medicaid if we did that. Rather than putting a bunch more people in a system that's not working, I think there are ways we can see it improve. We did some of that last session.
Right.
Some of those reforms we did last session, but we have to have cooperation from the feds.
Well, I was going to say, these are not new problems. These are not
That's
problems
right.
that just sort of sprung up over the last couple of months. My question is, if these are good reforms, if these are things that Texas should be doing affirmatively, why has Texas not done this up to this point?
Well, again, part of this is going to require cooperation from the feds. Senate Bill 7 last time had some really good reforms for Medicaid, and of course that was broadly supported. But you were talking about the Health Care Act and about its implementation. Again, expanded Medicaid and health insurance exchanges give us an opportunity now to make the feds work with us, and I'm optimistic about that.
Okay. Let me ask you about water. We've just come out of the worst one-year drought in the history of the state. We have a $53 billion unfunded state water plan. Chairman Ritter is working hard on the House side. I assume Chairman Fraser on the Senate side as well to figure out, do we have the right plan? How much of the cost of the plan can be borne by the state, should be borne by the state, and where are those dollars going to come from? Chairman Ritter has floated before, and I think intends to float again, the possibility of a tap fee, where individuals, companies, and industry would pay a certain amount of money a year. He considers it to be a trivial amount of money a year, and that after a while that would add up to essentially half the cost of the overall state water plan. But others oppose that. They don't like the idea of asking people to pay more. Where would Speaker Hughes come down on the question of funding the state water plan?
Obviously, it's up to the House. It's a matter that has to be debated. I think there's a couple of options out there. Some kind of a revolving fund, sort of like we do for transportation, where local entities can borrow against it, and it can stay there, it can grow, it can be replenished, is important. A couple places we could get the money. As I said before, if we take the money we have now, and in particular those dedicated revenue streams, and put them in the right place, I think we're going to gain some trust with the voters, and they're frustrated now, I think, especially with Washington, both parties that have been spending too much. So putting the money in the right place will help. Some have talked about the rainy day fund and looking at a constitutional amendment that says let's take the rainy day fund and dedicate a portion of that toward water infrastructure. Again, I'm not talking about...
Do you think such a constitutional amendment could pass?
Well, I think it could. I think people realize that water is a serious concern, and obviously it's about us having a dialogue with our constituents, and a lot of interest groups are already talking about water. That's one way to do it, and we're thankful for the oil and gas production we enjoy. It looks to be going nowhere but up, and so that's one good place where we could get some of that money.
I believe you were opposed to taking money out of the rainy day fund last session, right?
For the budget going forward. As you know, there's two ways to spend it, basically. We can use it to pay our current bills, and that requires I guess a 3/5 vote, but then a 2/3 vote to appropriate that money going forward. And I voted in favor of spending the part of the rainy day fund to pay our bills, but not to appropriate the money going forward.
So would water qualify as something on which you'd be comfortable taking a one-time withdrawal, effectively, given the robust health of the economy of late, the fact that the rainy day fund is likely to have, you know, a certain amount of money in it beyond what we even anticipated? Some have floated the possibility of saying on a one-time basis to get the water plan funding kick-started, we're going to take a certain amount out and use that as essentially a down payment against the water plant.
Right. Well, let me clarify. When I mention the rainy day fund, I'm talking about going to the voters and asking them if you want to dedicate part of this constitutionally going forward.
You're not talking about voting as a legislature to take money out for this purpose?
Well, I'm talking about, what I mentioned before was putting it before the voters to amend the Constitution to do that. Should we look at the rainy day fund for a one-time expenditure? I think that's really what it's for big ticket items like that. I think it's a debate we could have. I'm going to confess I haven't looked carefully at using part of the current rainy day fund for that. It's a debate we should have in the House.
Right.
It's obviously a legitimate function of government. It's a real need.
You think water, as the Speaker has, Speaker Strauss has indicated that water will be on the agenda, sort of in the top 2 or 3 items in the next session. Obviously, a lot of competing priorities, but he's made water, at least in his early comments about the session, a top priority. What do you think about that?
It's a big deal, and I think it's got to be near the top.
Okay. Let me ask you about higher ed. One of the big consequences of the last session, in addition to the governor's higher ed reform agenda being a big topic of conversation, a number of cuts came to higher ed. People talk about the cuts to public education, and they were significant, but a number of financial aid programs were cut. There's a lot of discussion of whether the cost of a higher ed, of a college degree at the moment is too high. Governor obviously has put his marker down on the possibility of $10,000 college degrees. Again, with higher ed being such a significant piece of the unrestricted portion of the budget, where would you come down on where the priorities of the House ought to be if you led it on higher ed?
If you look at what was done last session, as you say, there were a lot of cuts made. Public education was cut primarily in enrollment growth, which is serious. Higher ed actually had actual cuts to their existing appropriations, so it was pretty serious. A lot of members are concerned about that. I'm glad we're having this debate about the cost of higher ed and where the money's going.
Yeah.
It's obviously a huge cost for families, it's a huge cost for the state, and it's got to be a priority. I think it's got to be looked at. And again, thankfully, we're going to have enough money this time to look at things like this. So I think we got to talk about it.
Okay. Let me ask you about 2 more things that are relevant to your work in the legislature, would be relevant to your work as leader, and were outgrowths of the presidential campaign. One is changing demographics. You know, we've had a lot of discussion over the last 10 days about the Republican Party and Latinos, that at the national level, Governor Romney in the presidential race did worse than Senator McCain did 4 years ago, who did worse than Governor Bush and President Bush did historically in Texas and nationally with Latino voters. And there's some concern that possibly the rhetoric and the work product of Republicans is putting off Hispanic voters who might otherwise be inclined to support the Republican Party. One of the issues that is likely to come up again this session is in-state tuition.
Right.
Charles Krauthammer said on the night of the election that Governor Perry's stance on in-state tuition and Governor Romney's decision to get to the right of Governor Perry on in-state tuition may have been the thing that began to derail Governor Romney's presidential campaign. I understand from members of the Senate that there may be an attempt to kick in-state tuition to the curb this session. What would you say, as leader of the House ought to do on the question of in-state tuition? And how does that tie back into Latinos and the Republican Party?
If you look at the polling that I've seen for Hispanics in Texas, I believe I read in the Texas Tribune a couple of days ago, or maybe a week ago, that 46% of Hispanics in Texas self-identify as conservative, 30-something is moderate, and a much smaller number identify themselves as liberal. So, as I think you said, this is a natural constituency for the Republican Party. As Republicans, we have to do a good job of getting the message out.
Have you done a good job so far?
There's definitely there's definitely a concern with the way it's being presented. Yeah. And there's a perception. It's easy to paint the position as being anti-immigrant, which is certainly not my position. Obviously, we're a nation of immigrants, as it should be. We're a melting pot. We're also a nation of laws. And I think the polling indicates that Hispanic citizens and folks who are here legally are in favor of enforcing the laws. But the Republicans, we have to do a better job of conveying that message in the right way. In-state tuition for illegal immigrants, it comes up a lot. Bills are filed every session to deal with that. That was passed in 2001 before I got to the legislature, so I've never taken a vote on that.
Would you vote to kick it to the curb, or would you vote to retain it as policy?
Oh, I've taken a position that it should be repealed. And again, the vote hasn't come to the floor, but that's been my position. Right. A number of members have said that. It's a debate we need to have, and these debates are difficult. I understand that. I've been on the floor, and we're among friends, and we have to talk about some gut-wrenching issues, but that's okay. We should be doing that.
But as Speaker, if the decision of the members was to keep in-state tuition, you as the Speaker, even though you oppose it personally, would not interfere in any way with the House going forward to keep in-state tuition legally.
If a bill,
Right.
if that's what the members want to do and they have there's support among the members, the speaker should not be trying to thwart that process.
Sanctuary cities was on the governor's list of emergency items last session. It was something that was a hot-button issue among many Latinos, specifically in the legislature, did not ultimately pass last session. That's one of the issues often cited by Latinos that have put some distance between them and the Republican Party. Republicans attempting to pass sanctuary cities. Would Speaker Hughes want to see sanctuary cities revived as an issue in the next session or not?
If it has broad support among members of the House, it ought to come to the floor for a debate.
It didn't last time. So the idea would be if it does not enjoy the same level of support.
Did you say did not last
Well, I mean,
time?
I think across the whole legislature. I mean, I'm not saying specifically in the House, but you're saying just in the House specifically, if it has broad support again, it obviously didn't make it ultimately.
Right. Well, as Speaker, my focus is on the House
Right.
and what the House members are hearing from their constituents.
So
And
you would say basically if the House wants to go at it again, you'd be fine with that. Would you personally like to see it come back up?
yeah, it's important debate. Everyone's talking about it. Just like the discussion we're having. People are interested in these issues, and we have to get it right. And I think people on both sides are going to listen, and maybe the bill can be done differently. I read somewhere where the bill might be in a different form this time. I think Chairman Solomons was speculating how it might be stronger or weaker. I don't recall if that was in the Tribune or on some newspaper I saw that.
Right.
But if the members are hearing from their constituents this is important, we should have the debate.
Okay, and any of the other issues that are likely to come up that you can think of that might be problematic for this question of Republicans and Latinos? I know that voter ID was a big issue last session, obviously. Redistricting has come back around again as an issue. There may be another swing at that ball. Anything that you think would be of particular interest to Latinos as they look at what their relationship with the Republican Party is in next session?
Again, the Republicans, we all need to do a better job of communicating and listening and
So it's a
communicating these
communications
things.
issue more than anything else.
Well, again, I think that's a big part of it. Again, the numbers I read in the Tribune and elsewhere say that our Hispanic friends tend to be conservative.
Right.
They're obviously, they're family-oriented, they're very traditional in their values, and so they're a natural constituency. I think you may have said that, a natural constituency for the Republicans. We need to reach out to them, and that's important.
Last one, again, running out of the presidential race, there was a question about women's issues related to women's health, contraception, abortion. Rape was obviously an issue unexpectedly during the last campaign cycle. You were actually quite active in the family planning discussion during the last session. Should women looking ahead to the agenda in the next session be aware of anything that you think the House should be bringing up again? Has that portfolio of issues now been litigated? Is that more or less done? Will we see any issues related to family planning, abortion, anything else that didn't get done last session that might come back up next session?
Well, as you said, it was an issue last time, and speaking of communication, we had a couple of high-profile Republican candidates at the national level who just said things that I don't know where that was coming from, and it was troublesome for everyone, and we wondered why they would say those things. But they did, and it obviously had an effect. Need to be careful how we present the message. If you're asking about pro-life bills, the majority of Texans tell us in polls that they're pro-life. The majority of the legislature, last session we had about, I think, 105 members of the House, Republican and Democrat, who identified themselves as pro-life. So yes,
and you got quite a bit done on that issue.
We did. Much of that was done on the floor. I'd say most of it was done on the floor through the amendment process and working, because we had a lot of pro-life members. I think we're going to have another pro-life majority in the House.
Anything left undone that you want to bring up in the next session?
Oh, okay. Yes. I've been reading some about this, and some members are talking about the issue of fetal pain. Medical technology is improving. We're learning more about the development of the unborn child, and we know now that I think everyone agrees, I think all the experts across the board say that at 20 weeks, the little unborn baby can feel pain. Well, we need to talk about that, because if the child's capable of feeling pain, we need to think about, is it appropriate to allow an abortion in a case like that? So I think there's going to be a debate about that. We talked about the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. There were bills filed last session that said if health insurance exchanges are set up in Texas, we're going to opt out of abortion coverage for those. And those bills didn't move last session. And I don't think we're going to adopt health care exchanges in Texas, but if we did,
that would be something
that would be something that would come up. So those are some of the issues that you hear members talking about.
Very good. All right, well, Representative, thank you very much. We're going to turn it over to the audience for questions, but I appreciate your being here. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Great.